Everyone wants progress. Everyone wants momentum. Everyone says they want results. But very few people are willing to do the one thing that guarantees all of it. Take consistent action. Not dramatic action. Not once a year, all-out bursts of productivity. Not grand gestures that impress people for a day. Consistent action. The small, steady, repeated movement that may not get applause in the beginning, but builds something powerful in the long run. Because real growth doesn't come from intensity. It comes from rhythm, from showing up even when you're not motivated, from doing the work when it's boring, from honoring the commitment after the emotion is gone. And most people never master this. Not because they don't care, not because they're lazy, but because they haven't yet made peace with the fact that greatness lives inside the mundane. The world is loud with hype, with noise, with new strategies. People love to talk about the next big thing, the breakthrough method, the shortcut, the overnight transformation. But the truth has never changed. Success still belongs to the consistent, not the loudest, not the flashiest. The ones who keep going, the ones who stay in motion when everyone else is waiting to feel inspired. The ones who stack small wins day after day until those wins turn into identity. You don't need more talent. You don't need more luck. You don't need a better time of year. You need to decide. Decide that motion matters more than mood. That follow-through matters more than feeling good. That discipline will serve you longer than motivation ever could. Because motivation fades, energy runs out. Emotion is unpredictable. But consistency, that's a choice. That's power. That's ownership. Most people confuse inconsistency with lack of discipline. But it's deeper than that. It's usually a mindset problem, a misunderstanding of how growth actually works. People expect immediate feedback, fast results, instant rewards. And when that doesn't happen, they assume something's wrong. They assume they failed. They assume they're not cut out for it. But nothing's wrong. It's just that results take time. And time only pays people who are still moving. Think about anything lasting. A relationship, a business, a skill, a body, a reputation. None of it's built in a weekend. All of it is built through repetition, through showing up, through practice, through failing and trying again, through doing the work when you don't feel like it, through choosing movement over mood again and again and again. And it's not that successful people are superhuman. It's that they've trained themselves not to disappear when things get repetitive. They've trained themselves to value progress even when it's invisible. They've stopped relying on passion and started relying on pattern. And pattern, that's where the power lives. Not in hype, in habit, not in emotion, in execution. This is the great separator. Not who starts, but who stays. Not who posts about it, but who practices it. Not who shows up once in a while when it's convenient, but who builds the lifestyle that turns consistency into normalcy, into identity, into a baseline they refuse to drop below. That's who wins. That's who grows. That's who builds something that lasts. Consistent action doesn't start with discipline. It starts with decision. Not a vague intention, not a half-hearted wish, a real decision. One made in a quiet moment, away from the noise. A decision where you say, I'm done negotiating with myself. Because that's what breaks most people. Not the work itself, but the daily mental debate over whether or not to show up. And every time you re-enter that debate, you lose energy. You lose clarity. You let your feelings sit in the seat where your values should be. You'll never be consistent if you keep voting on the same commitment every morning. It has to be decided ahead of time. Your default setting has to be show up, Not show up if I feel good. Not show up if it's convenient. Just show up. That means taking feelings off the throne and putting principles there instead. That means trading temporary comfort for long-term strength. That means knowing who you are before the day tries to convince you otherwise. This is where identity begins to intersect with action. Most people think action follows belief, but it also works the other way. The more you act in alignment with your values, the more those actions begin to reinforce who you are. Every time you honor your word to yourself, you cast a vote for the kind of person you're becoming. And those votes add up, not in one day, not in 1 week, but over time, they create self-trust. They create identity. They create a standard that eventually becomes automatic. But consistency requires structure. You can't just rely on willpower. Willpower is a fragile fuel source. It's like lighting a match every morning and hoping the fire doesn't go out before noon. What you need is rhythm, routine, systems, something that holds you when your motivation doesn't. And it doesn't have to be complicated. It just has to be consistent. A simple morning ritual, a repeatable work setup, a decision to move your body at the same time every day, a plan to prep your meals, to clean your space, to return to your goals even when yesterday didn't go as planned. These things aren't glamorous, but they're powerful because they create anchors, and anchors don't let you drift. The real win of consistent action is momentum, not results, momentum. Because results are delayed, results can lie, results can be manipulated. But momentum is honest, it's immediate, it's yours. It's the quiet energy that builds when you do what you said you'd do, even when no one is watching, even when it doesn't seem to matter yet, even when the payoff hasn't shown up. Momentum is emotional. It's internal. It's a shift you feel when your habits start stacking, when your identity starts locking in, when your decisions stop feeling forced and start feeling normal. And most people never get to experience it because they quit too soon. They stop at the first sign of resistance. They disappear when it gets repetitive. They break the streak, and instead of returning, they retreat. But the magic isn't in the streak. It's in the return. It's in the decision to come back after missing a day. It's in the moment you feel like giving up and you take one small step forward anyway. That's consistency. Not perfection, not doing it every single day forever without fail. It's becoming someone who always returns, someone who recommits faster, someone who doesn't let a bad hour turn into a wasted day. You train this by lowering the activation energy. Make it easier to begin. Have the clothes ready, the book open, the workspace clean. The first step so small you don't have to feel motivated to take it. Because once you start moving, momentum takes over. And momentum always beats hesitation. Movement builds confidence. Confidence builds clarity, and clarity keeps you going. So don't wait for the perfect plan. Don't obsess over optimizing every detail. Just begin. Build the habit of beginning, even on the hard days. Especially on the hard days, because every hard day you show up makes the next one easier. It makes your identity more real. It makes your standard more solid. And that's what you're building. Not just a result, but a standard. One that doesn't break every time life throws a curve. This is how consistency becomes freedom. It's not restriction, it's release. You don't have to think so much. You don't have to debate every move. You know your path, you know your pace, and you trust the process because you trust yourself. That trust is earned. It's earned every time you act from a place of principle. not preference. Every time you honor the rhythm, not the feeling. Every time you move because you're building, not because you're inspired. Consistency is misunderstood because the results often come so slowly, so quietly, so uneventfully, that most people never notice they're stacking something powerful. It's only when they stop that they realize what they lost. It's only after they break the rhythm that they look back and see how much ground they were actually covering. And that's the test. Can you keep going when it doesn't feel like it's working? Can you keep showing up without instant feedback? Can you live inside the tension of faith and discipline long enough to let the compound effect work for you? The compound effect is not just about money. It's not just about interest rates or financial investment. It's about everything. Relationships, skills, habits, health, reputation, emotional control, your presence, your integrity. Everything meaningful is shaped by time, by effort, by unseen progress that adds up slowly, then suddenly. And the people who understand this, they stop rushing. They stop quitting. They stop demanding big results from small windows of effort. They play the long game. This isn't about working yourself into the ground. It's about respecting the fact that you are always planting seeds, whether you realize it or not. And what you water grows. Your words, your thoughts, your routines, your energy. It's all creating something. And the only way to make that something beautiful is to tend it with care, with repetition, with patience. But consistency breaks when your goals are disconnected from your identity. When your vision is exciting, but your habits are random. When your to-do list is long, but your core values aren't clear. When you haven't yet become someone who acts from alignment, not emotion. Because when you're aligned, you move with conviction. When you're not, you move with confusion. And confusion breeds inconsistency. So what do? You make your habits match your future. You ask, what would the best version of me do today? You align the small with the big. You stop looking for massive action and start looking for consistent alignment. Because if your small steps are aimed at the right mountain, you'll get there. If they're not, it doesn't matter how fast you go. You're heading in the wrong direction. This is why reflection matters. You can't just work. You have to think. You have to check in. You have to ask if your calendar reflects your priorities, if your habits reflect your values, if your mood reflects your decision, or the other way around. Most people are too busy doing to realize they're doing the wrong things. Consistency without direction is a trap, a treadmill with no exit. So you slow down, you assess. You don't need to overhaul everything. You just need to connect the dots to make sure the way you're living reflects the life you're building. Because once it does, consistency becomes easier. Not because life gets easier, but because you're no longer in conflict with yourself. You're no longer dragging yourself through a plan that doesn't feel right. You're in flow. And flow is born from alignment, not effort. But alignment still requires effort. You still have to show up. You still have to push through resistance. You still have to act when you don't feel like it. The difference is now, the action feels honest. It feels anchored. It feels like you're doing what you said you would. Not because someone told you to, but because you told yourself the truth. And you stopped lying to yourself for the sake of comfort. That honesty, that willingness to do the hard thing when it's aligned with who you want to be, that's where consistency thrives. It doesn't need hype. It doesn't need a crowd. It just needs integrity. Quiet, internal, repeatable integrity. The kind that doesn't break when you're tired. The kind that doesn't fold when no one's watching. The kind that shows up over and over until the habits become identity. So the question is not, can I stay consistent? The question is, can I build a life that makes consistency easier? Can I simplify? Can I align? Can I clarify what matters most and remove what distracts? Can I create routines that support me instead of stress me? Can I design an environment where the default is aligned behavior, not constant resistance? That's the secret most people miss. Consistency isn't just about willpower. It's about environment, structure, rhythm, habit, identity. It's about reducing friction and increasing flow. It's about engineering a life where the right thing becomes the easy thing. Not because it actually is easy, but because you've practiced it so many times, it feels like home. Consistency gets tested most in silence, not in the big moments, not in the breakthroughs, not when the world is watching, but in the empty space, the seasons when nothing seems to be moving, when progress feels invisible, when it looks like your effort isn't making a difference. That's where most people fall off. Not because they lack skill, but because they lack certainty. Because they've equated progress with proof. And when the proof disappears, so does their belief. But belief is never built in outcomes. It's built in follow-through. It's built in the act of staying with something long enough to see what it becomes. Because consistency, at its core, is an act of faith. You're planting with no harvest in sight. You're writing with no guarantee anyone will read it. You're training, studying, building, serving without applause. That's what makes it so powerful and so rare. Because staying consistent when it's easy doesn't shape you. Staying consistent when it's empty does. When your calendar is full, but your soul feels tired. When you're checking off boxes, but questioning whether they still matter. When no one's affirming you. When you're the only one clapping. When the journey feels long and you forgot what the finish line even looks like. That's when identity gets forged. This is where you learn to anchor your actions to who you are, not to what you get. You stop acting because you're chasing a result, and you start acting because this is who you've become. A builder, a leader, a person who honors their word even when the return is delayed. And that delay, that space between input and outcome, that's where power lives. Because that's where most people quit. You train yourself not to panic in the pause. You train yourself not to interpret stillness as failure. You train yourself to hold the line without the need for constant validation. And once you learn that, you become unstoppable. Because now, your behavior isn't reactive. It's rooted. It's intentional. You don't move just because something feels urgent. You move because it's time. Because you decided. Because you trust your standard more than your feelings. Trusting the process is hard when you're wired for feedback. When you've been conditioned to expect likes, comments, applause, sales, results, fast. But the most meaningful progress is always slow, always quiet, always built below the surface before it's ever seen above it. That's not a flaw, it's a feature. Because if it came easy, everyone would have it. And if it came fast, no one would be prepared to carry it. You don't become the kind of person who wins consistently by winning occasionally. You become that person by learning how to move when nothing moves around you. By doing the work with no applause. By staying faithful to the plan when the payoff hasn't shown up yet. You keep the pace. You keep the rhythm. You show up because it's what you do now, not because you're trying to be seen. This builds resilience, not the dramatic kind, the quiet kind, the kind that doesn't break under pressure, the kind that bends without folding, the kind that knows exactly what to do when life gets unpredictable, because it's trained to respond, not to react, but to respond, to act from values, from principle, from clarity. And that clarity doesn't come from one good day. It comes from hundreds of average days, hundreds of reps, hundreds of quiet moments where you did what you said you would, not because you felt like it, but because you said you would. And that evidence stacks. It builds a reputation, not with others, but with yourself. You know you're dependable. And that self-respect, that's your real reward. Because the person who respects their own word becomes powerful in any room. You don't need to convince anyone. You walk in integrity. You speak from experience. You act from identity. You don't need to fake confidence. You've earned it, not from applause, but from consistency. That's the kind of success that can't be taken from you because it wasn't given to you. You built it. The people who build extraordinary things aren't the ones who got it all right the first time. They're the ones who kept returning after it went wrong. And that return, that ability to pick up momentum again after disruption, is one of the most underrated parts of consistency. Because you will fall off, you will miss days, you will break your rhythm, and the people who lose aren't the ones who failed. They're the ones who took failure as a signal to stop instead of a signal to reset. There's a myth that consistency means never missing, never slipping, never feeling off. But the truth is, consistency is built on the return. It's built on the ability to reset quickly, to shake off the shame, to interrupt the spiral, to say, that wasn't ideal, but I'm back now. And to mean it, to act on it, to re-engage without needing to be perfect first. Because shame is a killer of momentum. Shame says, you missed one day, you're a failure. Shame says, you didn't finish the project, why even try again? Shame tries to turn one missed step into a permanent story. But consistency isn't about shame. It's about rhythm. It's about knowing what to do when the pattern breaks. It's about leading yourself back into the groove instead of punishing yourself for falling out of it. The faster you return, the less power the interruption holds. The faster you recommit, the more resilient your identity becomes. Because now you're not just someone who shows up, you're someone who comes back. And that return builds muscle. It builds grit. It builds faith. Not just in the process, but in yourself. Most people wait to feel like they have earned the right to restart. They wait to feel motivated again. They wait for some signal that says, you're allowed to come back. But that's not how it works. You don't wait for permission. You return because it's who you are. You don't need to feel perfect. You don't need to fix everything first. You just need to act like someone who shows up even after they fall. That return resets your momentum. It reminds your nervous system that failure isn't final, that missing isn't identity, that inconsistency doesn't mean incapability. And the more you normalize that cycle, the more you make returning a habit, the more unstoppable your progress becomes. This kind of consistency is about grace and grit. Grace to let yourself be human, grit to keep moving anyway, grace to not punish every misstep, grit to keep the standard in reach, grace to forgive yourself for falling, grit to get back up faster. And when grace and grit work together, you stop living in extremes. You stop oscillating between all in and checked out. You start living in rhythm. Rhythm matters more than intensity. Most people start with intensity and crash when they can't sustain it. But the ones who build long-term success, they master rhythm. They know their pace. They know how to ramp up when necessary and how to scale back without quitting. They don't let one-off day destroy a week. They don't let one bad week become a story about their future. They respond with rhythm. You build rhythm by tracking the right things. Not just how many wins you stack, but how often you return, how quickly you reset, how little you negotiate with shame, how often you act even when you don't feel it. These are the real signs of consistency, the invisible victories that carry more weight than any public success. So if you're in a dip, return. If you've lost steam, return. If you've made a mess, clean it up and return. Not someday, not next week, today. Even if the return is small, even if it's quiet, even if no one notices, you return for you. You return because momentum is yours to rebuild. You return because consistent people aren't perfect. They're persistent. And persistent people don't wait to feel worthy. They act because they know who they are. Consistent action over time turns into compound impact. The kind of impact that doesn't just affect your life, but spills into the lives around you. Because the truth is, consistency doesn't just build results, it builds reputation. And your reputation isn't just about what people say about you. It's about what they feel when your name comes up. Do they feel steady? Do they feel confident? Do they think of someone who finishes what they start, or someone who flashes bright, then disappears? Consistency builds trust with others, with your team, with your family, with your audience. But even more important, with yourself. And when people trust you, you create room to lead. Not because you're charismatic, not because you're loud, but because your presence creates certainty. Because your energy says, I don't quit when it gets hard. It's not about how flashy you are. It's about how stable you are. It's about being someone people can count on. Someone who doesn't make emotional decisions in every storm. Someone who knows how to show up even when it's hard to show up. Someone who moves with a different kind of confidence. Not because they have everything figured out, but because they have a rhythm they trust. And over time, that rhythm builds weight. Your words start to carry more power. Your vision starts to attract more alignment. Your habits start to produce outcomes that feel like momentum, but they're really just the harvest of all the seeds you planted and kept watering when no one saw it. This is where leadership is born, not in moments of spotlight, but in months of repetition, in the choices that no one applauds, in the decision to keep going even when it feels like no one's paying attention. Because eventually, the world does pay attention. But by then, you're not building for them. You're building from something stronger, something deeper, something grounded. People follow consistency because it's rare. People respect it because it's real. People depend on it because it brings safety in a world that's full of volatility. And if you want to build something meaningful, whether it's a brand, a mission, a team, or a family, you need to become someone whose energy says, you can count on me. I don't flinch when things get hard. I don't fold when plans don't work. I adapt, but I don't disappear. That identity can't be faked. It's earned. It's built in moments when most people stop. In moments when momentum stalls. When everything feels still. When no one's clapping. When doubt whispers. When fear nudges. When quitting is a quiet, easy option. That's where consistency is built. Not when everything's working, but when nothing is. And the reward, it's bigger than the results. It's about who you become. You become someone who doesn't need the perfect setup to stay in motion, Someone who doesn't need ideal conditions to keep building. Someone who understands that the prize is the process, that the result is just the visible outcome of invisible consistency. You don't just become a consistent person. You become a person of presence, of power, of pace. Someone who brings certainty into uncertain rooms. Someone who doesn't get rattled by resistance. Someone who leads, not from noise, but from rhythm. And that kind of presence is magnetic. It draws people in. It gives them permission to be steady too. So the work you're doing, it's not just for you. Your consistency becomes an anchor for others. Your action creates room for their belief. Your momentum makes it easier for them to find theirs. Because consistency isn't selfish. It's generous. It's leadership. And that's the legacy you build. Not just results, but rhythm that others can walk in long after you're gone. Now that every piece has been laid down, the question isn't whether consistency works. The question is whether you're ready to live it. Not just once, not just for a week, but as a way of being, a personal standard, a silent code. Because consistency isn't just a means to an end. It's the whole framework. It's how things get built, and it's how they last. You've seen now that consistent action isn't driven by hype. It's not powered by ideal conditions. It's not dependent on applause. It's a decision made in private, a rhythm chosen in silence, a steady yes that becomes your identity. And when that identity is real, when you stop waiting for perfect moments and start moving from who you've decided to be, everything changes. You stop being a slave to emotion. You stop riding the waves of inspiration and burnout. You stop restarting over and over because you finally built something that can survive your low days. And that kind of life, that kind of structure isn't just productive. It's peaceful because now your energy is rooted. Your path is stable. Your habits serve you instead of stressing you. So now the responsibility is yours to keep returning when the rhythm breaks, to keep anchoring to your values instead of your feelings, to keep choosing movement over waiting, to keep building even when no one sees it. Because it's not about who sees it. It's about who you're becoming while you build it. And you already know the person who stays in motion long enough becomes unrecognizable to the one who only started strong. Don't wait for the motivation to return. Don't wait for conditions to align. Don't wait until you feel good enough to begin again. Begin now. Reset now. Recommit now. And keep going. Not because it's easy, but because it's right. Because the life you want will not be built by effort alone. It will be built by effort repeated. That's the power of consistent action. It shapes your days. It builds your future. It rewires your identity. And if you stay with it, quietly, persistently, faithfully, you'll look back one day not just amazed at what you accomplished, but proud of who you became along the way.